Here we go. So can you see the PowerPoint? Well, cool. Okay, so we are delighted to welcome you to this Journal of Business Research paper development workshop for the special issue Reframing Corporate Social Responsibility in an Age of Polycrisis. Over the next hour, my colleague and I will briefly share how this special issue came together, the motivations behind it, and most importantly, what we are hoping to see from the submissions. We, of course, want this to be supportive sessions, so there will be space after our presentation for questions about the special issue, so feel free to ask any questions you may have. So before we begin, we are I want to share my gratefulness to Mirella Klein and who is editor of Journal of Business Research and the Journal of Business Research team, because they were very supportive for the special issue. And yeah, actually the journal has been a strong platform for critical interdisciplinary research on CSR. So we want to build on that tradition to discuss CSR in an age of polycrisis. So we are very pleased to have Mirella here with us today, and she will briefly introduce the journal for us. So I will now hand over to Mirella to introduce the journal, and I will stop sharing my screen.
Thank you so much, Violetta. I will switch to sharing my screen. See if we can get us there. Always a little bit of a delay, I think. Getting there. Can you see my screen? Right. So, well, first of all, thank you, because running a special issue is by no means a small task. So we are always grateful for authors and researchers that have ideas and that step up and approach us with ideas for the special issues. It's also, as you might know, a competitive setting. So this was one of the few special issues that we selected. So congratulations to the team, and we really look forward to working with you, because we think this is a very important topic. I'll keep it brief, because the real information is, of course, about the special issue. But for those of you that are maybe a little less familiar with JBR, I just wanted to briefly inform you about the structure and way of working, because you will notice this once you start to submit. And maybe as a little bit of background, I'm not the only co-editor-in-chief. I'm doing this together with Dip. We just signed up for a second term, which is really cool, because I would say we spent the first 3 years sort of getting into gear. So it's very exciting to have a second term to really sort of further professionalize and grow the field. So we're very excited about that. And we have, of course, a pretty unique standpoint in the field. There are many journals out there, but I think there's not one journal like JBR. One of the things, and of course every journal will tell you that, but we have the timeline to do it, is that we really focus on impactful research, and we really want to sort of put that stake in the ground. So if you have front-running research that needs to get out there, we hope we are the journal for you. We have a very broad audience with 15 disciplinary tracks, which also allows us crossovers, and we're planning to capitalize on that more in the future. And I think this special issue is definitely an example of that. And that also means that we have a lot of submissions. So if you're curious, the number last year was almost 11,000 submissions. So, and that's a lot to deal with. Unfortunately, that doesn't always translate in more papers to publish. We don't have any limit on how much papers we can publish. So, you know, we always look to publish good research, but our acceptance rate is still around 6 to 7%. And that's not something to brag about. I wish it was a little higher. I know some people think scarcity is a good thing, but of course we want to give room to as much good research as we can. So the growth has been exponential, and it also weighs heavily on our team. So, and we hear that, of course, from many journals. So brace yourself for the special issue. But what is also interesting about JBR, I think that we are very open to phenomenon-driven research. So yes, we do like to publish fundamental research as well, but we're also very much interested in emerging trends and topics. And the world is changing so fast that we feel we can't do without. So we were already positioned for that anyway, and I think it's only getting more important. To give you a brief overview of our team, so we have actually a team of beyond that, we also have a team of co-editors that are called 6 of them by now. So also to help with any kind of issues that you might not be so familiar with, to help the team and support them in, what should we do? Are there any questions that are related to broader topics that JBR has experience with? So your paper is actually going to land when you submit on the very first desk with Nick. And Nick is the one responsible for distributing towards the guest editorial team. So there are a few more steps than in our kind of regular setting. And I always want to stress this because it seems obvious to us, but sometimes maybe not to an author that gets a rejected paper. We are in the business of publishing. We would love to publish as many papers as possible. So it always pains me to desk reject a paper. And what I didn't realize before I became an editor is that is pretty much most of my job, unfortunately. But when it moves on, then it gets really exciting. So my role as an editor and also as a co-editor, or even with JBR as an associate editor, is to really recognize the diamond in the rough. Now, the diamond still has to be there. So our job is not to make bad papers good. Our job is to recognize the potential of good papers and to help them develop further. So we have a paper in which we have reasonable confidence that the results are strong and that the idea is interesting. And I say that because my personal belief is not that we all as the co-editor team or the reviewers are your silent co-authors. As authors, you have to do your job and then we will do ours. So otherwise, it gets a bit of a mess. So in this case, the guest editorial team takes on the role of what we normally have as the associate editors. They are the ones that do still a scrutinizing of the paper. The guest editorial team has the liberty to decide whether a paper or not is going to be rejected. They give us that advice, but we listen very closely to the team. All decisions in the final decision will be run by the overseeing editor, but normally there's very little discrepancy. So we are really, really listening to the guest editorial team. So they're your focal point of attention when you submit for a special issue. And of course, then there's the reviewers, and the reviewers' job is to be rigorous and to really see where the potential flaws are and to what extent we can repair them. And if they're not repairable, do we think they're acceptable? Because of course, no paper is perfect. So it's always good to keep in mind that once you get through that first desk reject round, nobody's out to get you. We are there to get you along. And hopefully, if you do your job and we do ours, we get there. Maybe interesting to know, numbers are numbers. I know rankings are debated a lot, but for some people it's important. JBR has been on a very steady trajectory. We're consistently around the 910. And we do well in that if you compare us to the bigger range of different journals, and we're very happy with that position. So we're not the top journal, but we are certainly one of the most cited journals. And I think in terms of our impact goal, that's really nice to see. You can't chase impact, but it's certainly great to see that the papers we do select and do get published and you work on very hard also get recognized in the field. So then, as a final note, I would like to say that although we're not promoting conferences, I would be happy to see you in Bath, because EMAG is, of course, coming up with some of the people in this team. We do organize a lot of sessions. If you're going to conferences at EMAG and the Academy, we will always be present, because including AMA, which has just passed, we consider that sort of our home conferences, and we also organize our ERB sessions there. However, in many other conferences, I will, for instance, be attending Surfsnake, for summer. I'm going to the Global Fashion Conference in Madrid. We very often have media editor sessions or paperwork sessions to share with you insights about JBR, trying to overcome initial hurdles. So always feel free to join us there and keep an eye out for us. And for the rest, I would suggest just follow our social media, because certainly on LinkedIn, we have a big following now. We try to be very active also about special issues. And I wish you a really good time with the team.
Thank you very much, Mirella. This was super interesting. It's always interesting to learn about the view of the journal and the editor. So thank you very much for this. I will share my screen again. And yeah, here we go. So this special issue is edited by a team of 4 guest editors. So we have Professor Sarah Gloser from the University of Bath, UK, myself, I'm senior lecturer here at the University of Bath as well. Professor Charles Shaw from York University in Canada, and Professor Mette Morsing from the University of Oxford. And we actually bring together expertise across different fields: CSR communication, sustainability, marketing, critical management, accounting. So we really value the multidisciplinary perspective of this special issue. But although we have these different backgrounds, we share the same idea that existing CSR frameworks are increasingly challenged by the conditions of polycrisis, which includes climate change, social inequalities, institutional fragility. So our collaboration reflects a shared commitment to opening up CSR research to new questions, new methods, and new voices that can speak meaningfully to these realities, to CSR in time of polycrisis. But the idea of having this special issue is not very new, meaning that it goes back to 2024 or even earlier, when we started organizing the CSR Communication Conference. So we decided that we wanted to, the theme of this conference to be communication in a world in crisis, because we were interested in bringing together new conceptual and empirical research that could explore the role of CSR communication in various environmental, social, and political crises. So we started co-organizing this conference. Sarah and Andy, who is here with us and supported us also with the development of the special issue. We invited 3 guest speakers, again with very different backgrounds. So we had Mara Scott with a background in marketing, Jeremy Moon from Copenhagen Business School with an expertise in political science, and Professor Charles Shaw, who is an expert we know in accounting, and he's part of the editorial team for this special issue. We also had a few practitioners discussing CSR, the challenges, limitation of CSR, but also its merits, of course. But and we had more than 50 presentations. So from all the conversation that were happened during the CSR communication conference, we realized that all were pointing to the fact that CSR need to be reframed. CSR is quite film-centric. So we felt the need to continue these very interesting conversations and develop this special issue. You can also, if you're interested, take a look at the proceedings of the conference that may include interesting insights on CSR communication and polycrisis. So now I will leave the stage to Charles, who can discuss more our view on CSR and polycrisis and the aim of the special issue.
Great, thank you, Diletta. Yes, it's nice to be here. Thanks for coming, everyone. So as Diletta mentioned, when I was in Bath about a year and a half ago to give this keynote, the theme was on this polycrisis. And when I prepared my keynote, I had to think about it from not only the accounting perspective, from as a global perspective. And I think we can just refer to the definition you see here from the World Economic Forum about what polycrisis is. It basically a lot of cluster of interrelated risk across the world, globally speaking. So when you look at polycrisis, when I teach my students about sustainability crisis, it could be a bit depressing because it's overwhelming to see all of these crises at once. But it's exactly the phenomenon that we are looking at. So they are like, for the core characteristics of a polycrisis, we see it as the interconnectedness, basically having one shock in one system, like the recent pandemic had an effect on other type of crises, such as mental health and supply chains and people's life. Also, the fact that it's not necessarily linear. There is no like linear progression or regression. Is non-linear with some small or large inputs and perturbation that just come and go, and they lead to some tipping points where the system, the state becomes quite irreversibly altered and changed. And then third, there's of course, like every crisis, there's a lack of controls where the complexity of those interactions makes it quite challenging for policymakers to find some kind of solutions because I mean there's nothing sometimes you can do, and they are sometimes getting worse. When the solutions are found, there's another problem that can come up that is unintended consequence. So the world's facing all these connected risks that threaten is a polycrisis. So, for example, the cost of living crisis is, of course, right, with the economic crisis, immediate and severe global risk. Obviously, the physical one you see, climate change, climate-related risk, are the biggest facing our world. So if we have a polycrisis, could have catastrophic consequences, including things like war and armed conflict, as we see. So we're actually living in a period of polycrisis. You can see that in our lives and in the media and in the news. Climate change, okay, as I said, is going to impact many things, such as food insecurity, migration, pandemics, geopolitical instability. Okay, we've seen what happens in Ukraine and other parts of the world that trigger economic impacts, such as energy, food prices. Then you have inequities of resources and wealth, so we call it economic disparity, that obviously also reduce capacity for collective action because we are so unequally equipped and resourced. And technological acceleration, we have AI, the evolution of AI and digital infrastructure that can create new risk for information risk, for job security, for other type of fake news, etc., that has also serious impact on our lives. So all of these lingering impact from COVID-19, climate change, biodiversity loss, social inequalities, as I just mentioned, from a inequity perspective, and political polarization and economic fragility, that altogether form what we call a polar crisis. And this is kind of the focus of what we're trying to see from a research perspective from multidisciplines. I think we can move slides later. Yeah. So as we had introduced first, we have current frameworks and current theories and current work in CSR that is probably not as updated as it should be, given the evolution of our crisis we just discussed. So we are not equipped to address those system crises. The current work, it's focusing on the unit of analysis of organizational level rather than societal level. So unit of analysis could be broadened at a higher level, and the real world impact on impacted communities is also not as valued. So with the special issue, while we're trying to bring and to solicit papers and hoping to get papers that address some of the issues, is to bring theoretical, empirical, case-based research that would reframe CSR in a world of intersecting crisis, that would challenge the traditional conventional CSR research assumptions and generate insights for both theory and practice to make meaningful impact and hopefully change. So in a nutshell, and this is what Sarah will elaborate more specifically, but Polycrisis focused CSR research, then kind of the sort of the other around society-centric CSR and Polycrisis, and impact-oriented interdisciplinary CSR research. So these three main areas are what we are looking for, and I'm passing on to Sarah to elaborate on each of those. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Charles and Diletta. I think, one of the main reasons that we were keen to work with JBR on this special issue is exactly because of what Mirella identified, in the sense of the journal being really phenomenon driven. Because I think in order to invite pluralism and interdisciplinarity and think about some of the big challenges that are facing us, and theorize hopefully some ideas for solutions, we need to bring a broad church of ideas. So from the very outset, it's important to stress that this special issue is not focused on a specific theoretical lens, a specific kind of method. We are very open to conceptual, empirical, methodologically risky papers. We want to bring together new voices, new ideas, new ways of thinking about what we know of corporate responsibility, but in the context of, as Charles has articulated, these continuing polycrisis contexts. So thinking about the ways in which CSR and polycrisis shape one another. It's also important to mention that part of our remit for today was not just to provide an overview of our thinking as special issue guest editors, but also to invite those people who are already considering ideas to present those ideas back to us. So we've had a series of paper development workshops throughout the day on different time zones. We've already hosted one early this morning here on UK time, which was really inspiring. And I hope that the focus of today will give those of you who are developing ideas some food for thought. And we're very happy to continue the conversation outside of this room. Of course, the recording will also be available for you to look at. I must also thank Lauren Maberly, who's behind the scenes been supporting us with developing today's session and making sure all the logistics and communications have run smoothly. So a huge thank you to Lauren. So in terms of the three areas that we're looking for, just to give a little bit of a flavour around the kinds of questions perhaps that might be fitting with this special issue, perhaps potential ideas of context, theories, puzzles. We wanted to just give a little bit more of an indication. So the special issue call itself provides some further context around these, but Diletta, Charles, and indeed Meta, who wasn't able to join us today, have worked together to develop some ideas of how we kind of prioritize this super broad area of corporate social responsibility literature with the lens of polycrisis. So I think it's important to say that we are keen that papers speak to both of those things. We can see that there are some really strong conversations that are happening in CSR research that are quite critical perhaps at the moment. There are also there's an expanding literature happening around polycrisis, but we really want to look at the intersection of those two areas. So we're talking about business responsibility, organizational responsibility in the context of compounding, fluid, dynamic crisis that shape one another. So we see crisis as being ongoing and constitutive. So we're not just thinking about crisis as a one-off event, but something that is continually shaped. And we're interested in the role of business in this. So you can see here just some indications of potential questions. How do broader crises impact organizations, and how do organizations impact crises? How does the way in which we communicate and constitute corporate social responsibility perhaps shape crisis perceptions? But also, does what we know about CSR potentially redefine our understanding of polycrisis? What do we know maybe historically, but what maybe do we need to think about looking at more moving forward? So this is the kind of first anchor that I wanted to articulate, and we can think about here certain contexts in society in which we've seen certain crises compound one another. So, Charles mentioned already COVID-19, and, there was a huge amount of activity around Black Lives Matter around that time following the killing of George Floyd. And so thinking about perhaps how overlapping health, social, political, and economic crises then shape organizational efforts, with companies coming forward to provide COVID-19 assistance or to support civil society action around Black Lives Matter. Thinking about how those kinds of things coincide, I think is really, really interesting. So moving on from the kind of polycrisis and CSR anchor, the second aspect that we're looking for in the special issue is society-centered research, and we're quite unashamedly advocating here research that is not firm-centric. I think a lot of the literature, by definition of CSR, has focused on the role for business and for organizations. And what we're really keen to see is actually, the impact of CSR on the communities that matter, and also how they then shape CSR. And I think polycrisis gives us a wonderful opportunity with which to understand fluid moments in time, as Charles has already articulated. So in some ways, what we're keen to see are papers that decentralize the firm from theorization to look at different units of analysis beyond the firm. They may be more macro in nature, they may be more micro in nature. We're open to all of those things. And I think it's also thinking about how we can understand broader, perhaps intersectional, perhaps indigenous perspectives, perhaps countercultural movements that shape the role of business in society. And it might be CSR, it might be activities that are provoked potentially by polycrisis. It might be that polycrisis provokes certain things, business provokes certain types of activities. So thinking about the ways in which the broader societal context shapes and helps to inform and understand our knowledge of the way that organizations are operating in society. We acknowledge there has already been a gradual turn towards these society-centric research streams in CSR, but we feel that the multitude of crises that we're being confronted with at the moment perhaps helps and provides a context in which we can accelerate such research. And so we see an important opportunity to center perspectives from people and places that are directly and acutely experiencing polycrisis. So we can think here about where we've seen perhaps natural disasters, perhaps organizational lack of governance in the global south. Think about where there may be intersections between, say, contexts of weak regulation, maybe conflicts around land, maybe different kinds of priorities with stakeholders that relate to climate change, rural inequalities. Because I think at the heart of this kind of second theme that we're interested in is the fact that polycrisis may not be experienced uniformly it may be being compounded and shaped in different kinds of contexts. So being more alert to those, I think, in our theorizing is really important to provide more theoretical, methodological, contextual pluralism. So that's the second theme in the special issue. We can move now on to the third, which is more focused on impact and the idea of engaged scholarship. And the thinking here was, rather than to consider practical implications in a kind of paragraph or two at the end of a paper, but to really celebrate research that is working in partnership with communities, thinking about research that has real opportunity to create impact outside of scholarly impact. And here we set out a bit of a call for interdisciplinary thinking here, because while the tools that we have within our kind of management toolbox have helped us so far with our theorization, we're interested in actually transforming and enriching our understanding with our broad frame of redirecting and reframing the CSR literature, to think about how new insights can be brought into the field. It might be environmental science, it might be thinking about biodiversity thresholds, it might be development studies, thinking about poverty reduction metrics, it might be sociology and gender, thinking about intersectional inequalities and how we can bring these into the context of organizing, psychology, political science, the list goes on, right? So what we're keen to see here is new thinking, new ways of theorizing, new methods for collecting and perhaps combining insights that we already have in business and management with insights from outside of the field. So we're very much rooted to, as I say, impactful scholarship, but also scholarship that crosses traditional disciplinary boundaries in order to really generate some hopefully innovative, quite novel, quite provocative papers for this special issue. So that provides just a bit of an overview of our thinking. To give a bit of an opportunity just to reflect on some of the practicalities. Mirella already discussed the submission window. So there's a 1-month submission window in which you can submit papers to the special issue. They will be handled by Nick, who's our senior handling editor, and then distributed across the 4 members of our guest editor team. There is quite a tight and ambitious, it's fair to say, timeline for getting the papers published in JBR. They've set as a deadline of 30th of December. So it will be, you can expect to have decisions quite quick, hopefully. No pressure on the editorial team here, but we will be working quickly and efficiently to make sure that you receive decisions in a timely fashion. And we hope that we'll be able to work quite quickly to address this deadline. In some ways, a deadline is helpful in terms of ensuring that the actions need to take place. But I have to say, I think also given the topic with which we're focusing, a timely publication deadline is actually really helpful for us, because it means we'll be able to get research out, quickly, as quickly as academic timelines afford, but at least we'll be shaping and contributing to conversations that are very much live and topical. So there will be a special submission tab when you go into the Journal of Business Research submission portal to look for the VSI Polycrisis, that's the short title. And we're going to be aiming to publish 6 articles. I believe that does not include our editorial, so there'll also be an editorial on top of that. So that provides, I think, hopefully a bit of an overview and insight into our thinking. We're delighted to see so many of you here, and we look forward to receiving your papers. But in the meantime, I would just like to open the floor. We were keen to give ample time for questions and discussion. If anybody would like to take that opportunity now, please do so. So we can probably stop sharing the screen, the letter, and open the floor in case anybody would like to ask any questions. Or if anything isn't clear from what we've said, if there's anything you would like us to recap on in a little bit more detail. I think the main thinking and motivation that the letter set out is to bring together a team of scholars that do have different interests. So while we are all management scholars, our interests connect with broad areas of accounting, of marketing, of communication, so a broad range of different areas. I did see a question pop up in the chat. Oh, thank you, Emmanuel. Yeah, I mean, for us, the sweet spot is the intersection between both of those. I mean, CSR is the established literature that we'll be drawing from, but thinking about how we can inform that in contexts of crisis, and not just one crisis, of compounding continual crisis, I think is really important. So I guess the easiest way to respond to that is thinking about the intersection between the two. Yeah, I think in terms of, I understood from Mirella that they have certain space. They have quite a broad church when it comes to publishing papers, and they don't necessarily have space limits. But with special issues, they do set a target. So they've set as a paper target of 6, which is what we'll be working towards. And in terms of rejection, I think the submission guidelines will be on the submission portal. So every journal will have their own word limit, etc., to adhere to. So I guess that assuming that a paper passes the initial hurdle of correct formatting, etc., from the JBR perspective, in terms of what we will be looking for are papers that speak to both of the main themes of CSR and Polycrisis. That's what we want to try and identify. But I think it's fair to say that we want to be developmental in our feedback as well. We're keen to bring, as we've already said, new ideas and new voices in. So we'll be as supportive as we can. I think what we will also try and do is make decisions quickly given the tight timeline. So if we don't necessarily see a strong fit at the very outset for a paper with a special issue, we will make that decision quite quickly in the process just to save everybody time. Well, there's quite a few questions coming through.
You want me to answer some?
Yeah, I was just going to say, that's a chance. Do you want to jump in on any of these? Please do so.
I mean, okay, some of them I can. Okay, so we are doing it. I think it's still Emmanuel about quantitative. I don't expect to have a quota of, okay, we're gonna do like 3 qualitative, 3 quantitative. As we mentioned, I think JBR and us editors are not like focused on one specific methodology. So it's not like out of the 6, like we'll have like 4 and 2 or 3 and 3. It's not like that. We could end up with 5 or even 6 qualitative, or 4. It depends. I think that's, I don't know. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think we are looking for, oh, we need a number of qualitative papers and a number of quantitative papers. We want the most impactful and meaningful papers that has the best contribution, I think. But yeah. And I think the next, I guess that's the last one. How many peer review process should we expect? Oh, you mean the rounds? I don't know. Some journals have some policies like it's after 1 or 2 rounds, but it could, with given a timeline, I wouldn't expect to go, I would say more than 3 at least, or maybe a minor one at the end, because that's why I think the first round will be quite selective, because we need to make sure that this paper goes through if we really are seeing a potential there. So I think once you pass the first round, the more you go, the chances are higher. But yeah, I would expect hopefully no more than 2 rounds, maybe a third minor one at the end, because it's really a tight timeline. So from my experience as editor, at least that's what I would suspect. So hope we answer your question, Emmanuel.
Yeah, that sounds perfect, Charles. That sounds exactly in line with my thinking as well.
Oh, okay. Okay, that's I won't. I will just defer to you because the last question about the number of studies. I think it's more when you talk about the dependent method. I've seen these in experimental kind of studies, but I'm not 100% familiar. So I don't know if Diletta or Sarah, you had some thoughts on that.
Yeah, no, thanks, Charles. There isn't a number of studies in a single paper that we recommend. It's more about the quality of the study, probably, and the fact that your study or studies can actually answer your research question, and that the promises that you do in the introduction can be kept in the empirical part. So I can say the number of studies. Of course, if you ask me in general, if you have a study with self-reported measures about intentions, yeah, you may need to make your results more robust, adding other studies, but this is more in general, specifically for this call for paper. It's more, I think, about the quality of the studies rather than the numbers. So yeah. I don't know if this answers your question.
Yeah, it clearly misunderstood the question. Sorry, Emmanuel. I think Director did a better job answering the question about that.
I hope that answers
There
your questions, Emmanuel. In the
There's a
meantime, we
question.
can
Yeah.
we can move to Richmond. Go ahead, Richmond. Nice to see you.
Yeah, thank you very much. Nice to see you too. Thank you for the insight. It's very helpful. What I want to know is what's your level of openness to helping shape the papers? So apart from this workshop, are you still open to still helping the authors shape the papers beyond this?
Thank you, Richmond. It's a really important question. I think the aim of the whole editorial team is to be constructive, as constructive as possible through the process. So we'll be giving you as much guidance as we can to address the reviewers' comments. So the papers will, of course, still be going out to review. We have a pool of reviewers who we've identified for the special issue. Incidentally, when you submit your paper, if you do have reviewers in mind, you can also mention them in the special issue. It might be quite helpful given that we're looking for quite an interdisciplinary range of submissions. So feel free to suggest reviews for the paper if that's helpful. And I think what we will try and do is, while each paper will essentially be handled by one of the guest editor team, we will also be calibrating and collaborating across the four of us to make sure that, you know, our feedback is as supportive and consistent as possible. So I hope that clarifies and reassures you that we'll be, doing our best to make sure that you feel that you've got the right tools available to be able to answer the reviewer comments. Any more? We've got a couple more minutes if anyone has any further queries. Of course, you can always drop any of us a line over email if there are specific questions that come to light between now and September. Also, to your point, Richmond, if you have specific questions, of course, you can send them to the letter, Charles, Meta, or myself, and we'll be happy to help. It's wonderful to see so much interest around the special issue, and we've been really enjoying the PDW sessions that we've been having so far. Okay. Okay. Thank you, Emmanuel. Yeah, that's an interesting question. And I think that, I mean, you've seen we've got quite a good relationship with the editors at Journal of Business Research. So we can certainly consider if there are papers that don't fit the special issue, or we don't have the capacity to cater for them, how we do that. I don't have the answer to hand, unfortunately, because I don't yet know the JBR workings as well as Mirella does. It's a shame Mirella's not here, but we can certainly ask that question of Mirella and let you know.
I could maybe add something from experience.
Yeah, go ahead, Charles.
Also on the reservation of JBR policy, but at least in my journal, if a paper somehow does not make the special issue, especially for timeline reasons, because you could have a very good paper, and because we have a deadline, you may not make it because of that, but not necessarily because of quality. Then the general standard that I've seen and that we practice in our journal is that you will go through a regular issue. It could still be handled by the guest editors, but we have to be careful whether the paper is not making it because of that or because of quality issue. If it's borderline, as Emmanuel suggests, then I think we'll have to refer to the editor-in-chief to see what they would do. But there could be another reason, as I mentioned, the timing. It happens regularly that you have a paper in a special issue, but it just takes more time to revise it. Or sometimes you have, unfortunately, reviewers who are sometimes late. It happens. And in that case, there's no reason to penalize the paper because of that. So then a regular issue could be an option. It usually is. So hopefully that answers your question.
Okay, I've got, I think, another comment potentially coming through. Nice to see you, Josie, as well. Thank you very much. For those of you who are joining the PDWs this afternoon, we have another one taking place at 1 o'clock and then another one later on at 5 o'clock today. That's in UK time. So I look forward to having some more conversations about the papers then. But in the meantime, enjoy the rest of your days. Thank you so much for coming along and being interested in this special issue. We're very excited about it. So I hope that we've conveyed that to you as we've spoken through the motivations and the aspirations with the special issue. So yeah, we'll look forward to collaborating all with you further. And thanks so much for being here. Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Trying to understand how it works with the recording, so I can just leave the
Yeah, I think so. I think there's this one that's still the AI is taking a transcript, I think, for somebody, and that's still operating. But yeah, I think we can probably just leave the letter. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. See you later.
So I won't see you in the session at 5. You and Charles are running that one. And me and Charles will run the session now. But yeah, if anything pops up, I'll let you know. But enjoy the rest of your afternoon, Diletta.
Thank you. And you.
All right.
Bye.
Thanks, Diletta. Bye. Bye.